Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. I'd like to welcome everybody on this sultry summer afternoon. So the theme for the afternoon's talk is Memento mori, which means memento means to remember, or comes from the verb to remember. Mori is the word for death, like Mara in Latin. Mara in Pali. The Latin mori is death. So closely related there. So memento mori is something which reminds you of death. And the second part of the title is Are Aging, Sickness and Death Optional? So this looked like an interesting title of the ones that were suggested. So I thought this would be useful to reflect upon. Because on one level you might think, how can aging, sickness and death be optional? I mean, no one ever told me about this. But also if you just notice the name of this place, Amaravati, means the deathless realm. Mara, as in death, Amara, deathless. Vati means the place of, or the realm. So Amaravati means the deathless realm. So right there, in the name of where you are sitting right now, there's a clue that there might be some room for negotiation. We live in a culture which spends a lot of effort and attention on denying aging and death and evading that as a concept or as a possibility. That it's a culture, generally speaking, in the Western world that worships youth, and that is seen as being something that's good and wonderful and admirable. Take a look at the average advertisements that you see on big notice boards or in magazines. Everybody that you see in an advert, for most products, is usually about 23, good-looking and cheerful. Unless they're advertising stair lifts, or a cruise. Cruise opportunities for retirees. It's everyone is 23, good-looking and cheerful, and that's sort of the way we are conditioned to think we should be, and that if we're 17 or 18, we're eager to get on to being 23, and if we're 28 and 29, then we feel like we're past it already. And that certainly if we're 40 or 50 and beyond, then we definitely feel like, that my peak years have gone by, and then we judge ourselves, our appearance, our kind of position in society in many ways, in what our age happens to be. And so there's this weirdly irrational way that the society pushes away the possibility of aging and sickness and death, and as if it's some kind of strange aberration, something weird has gone wrong, that we've got older, or that this sickness has happened to us, or that we die. Even if it's not just in that kind of denying of the aging process, still just the way that we talk about death, or the way that we don't talk about death. Have you noticed how people use these kind of euphemisms? They say, if something should ever happen to me. In that simple phrase, how many conditionals have you got? If, not when. if something, a thing that we won't talk about what it really is, but that thing, if something should, another conditional, ever, that's 4 already, happen to me, then we put all these layers and buffers. We don't, because it's sort of bad table manners to say, when I die, or when you die, it's guaranteed to stop the conversation at dinner parties. It's something that you don't talk about. It's not polite. Well, isn't it strange that it's not polite, or it's not spoken about, or we use these strange kind of euphemisms, this sort of buffering language, because the fact is that, as I often point out on different occasions, every single one of us in this hall, every single one of these bodies, one of these days is going to breathe its last, right? Every single one of these bodies here gathered together at Amaravati, the deathless realm, definitely in 1 year, 10 years, 100 years, or who knows, 200 years at least, every single one of us will have stopped breathing, these bodies will have died. That's not news, right? This shouldn't be surprising, but yet, isn't it amazing how when I say those words, every single one of these bodies here is going to die, something in us goes, oh, no, there must be some mistake, or that can't be quite right. No, let's think this through. But you only have to think it through for about 3 seconds to realize, oh yeah, of course, how could it be otherwise? But we try to stave off that actuality with all kinds of different strategies. So there's still holding up sort of youth and strength and attractiveness as an ideal, sort of how we really should be, or how the perfect person is. That the kind of Hollywood or sort of Walt Disney-ish model of a person. But in our own lives, people, how much time and effort do people spend, and not just looking at the adverts, but also pursuing our sort of how our appearance can be made to look younger by having cosmetic surgery, readjusting our appearance, because looking old is not good, looking young is good in our cultural perceptions. There was an interesting, I was living in America for a number of years, and this woman, Kathy, who lives close to the monastery, she had 2 sisters. One who was an executive in Los Angeles, and the other one who is a charity worker in India. And Kathy was saying when they'd occasionally have family get-togethers, and she was saying how for her sister, they're all in their sort of late 50s, early 60s, for her sister in Los Angeles, it is completely inconceivable that she would not dye her hair. Like, she could not operate in Los Angeles with grey hair and be taken seriously as a professional businesswoman. That it just would be absolutely a non-starter. No one would take her seriously. Meanwhile, the other sister in India said, "At last, I've got grey hair. Now people will take me seriously." Because in India, you're just young. You're obviously, you're young and foolish. You don't really know anything. You've got no experience. So, so why would we listen to you? And so she said it was very strange how one has to dye her hair and the other one's really glad she's going grey, because for the same reason, just to be able to sort of to be respected or to function and to be recognised as a worthy person. So even nowadays, I'm not rejecting the idea of looking after our bodies, or say it's not worthwhile taking care of our health. I know there are many doctors here, so it's not that one is rejecting, if one's practicing Buddhism, you're not rejecting the idea of looking after the body and trying to stay alive and stay healthy for as long as possible. But more what I'm talking about is a kind of obsessive or neurotic, a kind of compulsive determination to stay young forever, or that the arrival of wrinkles and everything going south and east and west is intrinsically a bad thing. That when you look in the mirror and you think, oh, where did that old bloke come from? rather than thinking, oh my goodness, it's all falling apart, to instead to recognize, oh look, it changed. Aging is happening. It's visible, tangible. It's here before us. But this has been a constant theme for our society, and the idea of wanting to live forever. Even nowadays, with genetic engineering, you read reports occasionally of people trying to track down the death gene, the Thanatos gene, the genes that make us get older, that sort of control the aging process, and the gene that controls the death and dying process. And if we could just identify those genes and just go along the DNA sequence and just pop, switch them off, then we wouldn't get older and we wouldn't die. And wouldn't that be great? So it's very, very natural. I do keep a bit of an eye on the scientific world, and I see these kind of reports of sort of excited discoveries that people make. Oh, this is really wonderful. This is great. This could mean that we don't have to age. We don't have to die. We can just live forever. Well, there's a very well-known fable. You find it in many different cultures. I think you find it in Indian legend as well as European legend. That tells a story of a village that the people in this particular village, they had been very very devout and very caring and very spiritual, and they had pleased the local deities a great deal. That their conduct, their way of life had been very impressive, and I thought, well, these people are really wonderful. These people are really great. We should give them some kind of a reward. So then this local deity shows up and appears in the village and says, well, I've been very impressed with how you act, and I've been your guardian spirit, your guardian angel for a long time, so and I'm very pleased with how well you live together, and so that I'd like to grant you a wish, that can be bestowed upon the whole village. Now, what would you like? What would be your kind of your choice? If you have one thing that you could wish for that could be a blessing for the whole village, what would you like? And they say, oh really? We can have that? Yeah, sure, whatever you like, I have the power to grant it. So they have a quick discussion and they say, well, we'd like to banish death from this village, so that so nobody here ever dies. And then the guardian angel says, well, you sure you really want that? So, oh yeah, but wouldn't it be wonderful? And everyone here, we have such a good life, we love each other so much, we have a harmonious and beautiful community. So it would be great if we all just could live forever and carry on like this. So then the guardian spirit, the deva, says, oh well, okay, I'll grant you that wish. But you might want to think about this before you wish for it. And say, no, this is all we want. Yeah, we're all agreed, everyone agreed. Yeah. And so it's okay. So from this moment on, nobody in this village will die. So first of all, this is great, this is wonderful, and they are all happy as can be. And then not long after, one of the village kids is climbing around in the upper branches of a tree, and then falls down and then breaks several limbs, breaks his neck, breaks his leg, and is in great pain, and then sort of lying in his bed, and so shortly after the injuries have come about, then infection sets in, and he's in a terrible fever, and the bones won't mend, and he's in terrible pain. And the illness goes on and on, the infection gets worse and worse and worse, and the fever keeps getting higher and higher, and he's in terrible agony, and for 1 week after another, and then they realize, he's terribly weak, and he's got these awful infections, and his fever is never diminishing. Poor kid, and yet week after week, month after month, this boy is lying there in terrible agony, terrible pain. And these wounds won't heal, the infection won't go away, and yet the body stays alive. The heart keeps beating, the lungs keep breathing, and yet he carries on, just day after day, kind of crying and weeping and howling with discomfort. And then you can probably tell how the story develops. Then there's a little while later, there's another old lady, and her arthritis is getting worse and worse, and she's, every joint in her body is aching and is full with pain, and there's so much of a kind of it's so all-encompassing. Every bone, every joint in her body is filled with creakiness and pain and stress, and yet no matter how intense and difficult the arthritis that she has it becomes, then still her body gets weaker and weaker and stiffer, and yet still the heart keeps beating, the lungs keep breathing. On she goes. She's in so much pain. She can't eat properly. She can't think straight. She's in terrible agony, but yet still the body keeps on going. And then there's another couple of young lads who get into a fight with each other and have a terrible punch up, and then one breaks the other one's jaw, the other one smashes the other one's head, one sticks a knife in the other one, and then it goes into this long list of gory injuries. These two give each other, pounding away, knifing each other, clubbing each other, their bodies smashed to bits, but still their bodies stay alive. Their injuries are never enough to slow them down or to stop them completely, and they keep going, and as soon as they've got enough strength back from one set of injuries, they're back slamming into each other and arguing and fighting. And so, and then as the story continues, then over and over through different causes around the village, people realize, actually asking for death to come to an end, that was not really a very good idea. So then they start making prayers to the guardian spirit, say, could we have another, could we revisit the question of our wish? Could we go back over that again? Can we renegotiate? And the spirit came back and said, well, I had a feeling that you might come to this conclusion, but actually banishing death completely, that if you see what comes with that, it's not everything that you would wish for. Also, there's in Greek mythology, there's a story of a young fellow called Tithonus, who was a young fella, and the goddess of the dawn, Eos, falls in love with him, and they fall in love with each other. And so she's an immortal, and he's a mortal, and so they're madly in love with each other. So she begs for the favor from Zeus to let Tithonus be made immortal. And so Zeus, who is the father of Eos, said, Dad, please, could you do me a favor? Yeah, what do you want? And because she was the goddess of the dawn, she was a kind of favorite daughter, and said, okay, whatever you'd like, just name it and I'll grant it to you. So, please, could you help my boyfriend? And so could you make him a mortal, an immortal, like us? He's stuck with mortality. So would you grant him immortality? Would you give him the power to live forever? So Zeus says, fine, okay, done. And then of course they forgot to ask for eternal youth, as well as eternal life. And so as Eos, the goddess of the dawn, carried on being young and beautiful forever, year after year, century after century, then Tithonus gets older and older and more wrinkled and more shrunk, and yet he can't die because he's been made immortal. And so eventually, when Eos goes back to Zeus and says, please, could you help my boyfriend? He says, well, I'm sorry, you asked him to be made into an immortal, and so I can't undo that. And so she begs and pleads, and eventually she's granted the power to turn him into a grasshopper. So when you look at the face of a grasshopper, they look like a very wrinkled old person. So that's the legend of where grasshoppers came from, is the legend of Tithonus and Eos. So there is a lot of mythology about immortality and the trying to conquer death, and so you have these kind of superficial ways that we go about it through anti-aging cream and hair dye and cosmetic surgery, or we have these different stories and legends. But also, even more deeply within the religious traditions, you have, say, both within Christianity and Buddhism, then one of the central stories, the central mythology of both the Christian teachings and Buddhism is the conquest of death. So the story of Jesus on the cross, dying on the cross and then coming back to life, and that legend of the crucifixion and the conquest of death by Jesus. And then in the Buddhist tradition, you have the Buddha's experience of enlightenment, the Buddha's realization of enlightenment under the Bodhi tree, and that's spoken of as a conquest of Mara. Mara, just like Amaravati, Mara means death. It also means in Buddhist mythology, Mara is the embodiment of death. So Mara is a being who is known as the Lord of Illusion, or the one who is the being that is the cause of death, the killer, the corrupter. So the stories of the Enlightenment, you have the story of the Buddha sitting under the Bodhi tree, and then Mara coming to try and attack the Buddha and to distract him from his process of awakening. And then the process of enlightenment, mythologically, is represented as the Buddha being attacked by Mara, and the Buddha refusing to contend against Mara, but defeating Mara through the process of awakening, through realization. So we have these similar, in a similar way, the conquest of death as being a sort of central spiritual metaphor. And then after the Buddha's enlightenment, as he was making his way to Varanasi to meet up with his 5 former companions, and this wanderer called Upaka saw him walking along the road and was very struck, amazed by the appearance of the Buddha, this very tall, good-looking, rag-robed wanderer coming towards him, with his face radiant and serene. And so Upaka is just stunned by this extraordinary character walking along the road to him, and stops him and says, "Well, who are you, friend? Your face is so bright, your manner is so awesome, your demeanor is so serene and peaceful. Surely you must have had some kind of great experience or some sort of realization. What is it that you've awoken to? Who is your teacher? What is the kind of spiritual practice that you do?" And the Buddha says, I have no teacher. I've awakened by myself, but I have truly realized enlightenment, and I actually am the only enlightened being in the whole world. And Upaka's a bit taken aback by this. Oh, well, that's quite a statement to make. So he says, so by the sound of things, you're claiming that you've gained victory over birth and death, you've conquered death? And the Buddha says, that's right. And now I'm on my way to Varanasi to beat the drum of deathlessness. That's the phrase he uses. Now I'm on my way to Kasi's city, to Varanasi, to beat the drum of deathlessness. So Upaka, being confronted by this kind of a very grand declaration, says, well, good for you, friend. And so, okay, great, fine, great, wonderful, and is a bit overawed by the Buddha, and doesn't really trust that he's actually enlightened, but thinks maybe he's just a kind of nutcase. And so says, well, good for you, friend, and then shaking his head, he takes off by a different path. So then the Buddha, and by the time he reached his companions in the deer park, then he changed his approach a little bit. But that same, that same process, or that same, quality of conquering death, that same imagery and that actuality is right there at the center of the Buddhist story and the Buddhist practice. So, how is this different? What is this talking about? When the Buddha says he's awakened to the deathless, he's conquered death, he's broken free of birth and death, then what is that pointing to, or how does that fit together with these other ideas or aspirations? Well, on the one hand, I'd say that things like being moved by or sort of persuaded by the cultural forms, wanting to be 23 and good looking forever and ever, I would say this comes under the category of denial of death, and that's never going to work. Just hoping for the best and reaching for the hair dye, and fearing and regretting, begrudging the aging process and the lack of mobility and the loss of hearing and vision and so forth. Fearing it, resenting it, begrudging it, that's and hoping it's not going to happen to us. This is, I would say, comes under the category of denial of death. But what we're talking about is a basic spiritual principle that is embodied in the Buddha's enlightenment, and what we can aim for is more what you would call transcendence of death. Although you might be thinking, well, that's just kind of clever, that's just being clever with words, or just sort of weaseling around things. But I would suggest that it's not, and that there are actually two very, very different principles at work. So there's a passage in the suttas that I've always been very moved by. So I'll read this out. This is from Sutta number 26 in the Majjhima Nikaya, the Middle Length Discourses. And this is one of those short passages that ever since I heard it, read it the first time, it just sort of hit me like a sledgehammer, because it's so simple, but yet so completely radical. And it's the Buddha's talking about the time before his enlightenment, while he was still in the palace, and he's describing what motivated him to leave the life of a prince, to leave the life of luxury and comfort, and go out and to take up the spiritual quest. He says, "Before my enlightenment, while I was still only an unenlightened bodhisattva, being myself subject to birth, aging, ailment, death, sorrow and defilement, I sought after what was also subject to these things." So I chased after things that were also subject to aging and defilement, that were associated with sorrow and ailment and death. Then I thought, why, being myself subject to birth, aging, ailment, death, sorrow and defilement, why do I seek after what is also subject to these things? Why do I chase after that stuff? Suppose, being myself subject to these things, seeing danger in them, I sought instead after the unborn, the unaging, the unailing, the deathless, sorrowless, undefiled, supreme release from bondage, nibbana. So it's a very, very simple logic, right? If you can follow that. Saying that why am I being subject to birth, aging and death and sickness and sorrow, why do I chase after everything else that's also subject to these things? Material possessions that are going to get old and fall apart, or chasing after other people who are also going to get old and get sick, or identifying with my body, which is also going to get old and get sick and eventually fall apart and die. Why do I chase after these things? Why do I identify with that? Why do I not instead, it says, why do I seek after what is also subject to these things? Suppose, being myself subject to these things, seeing danger in them, instead I sought after the unborn, the unaging, the unailing, deathless, sorrowless, undefiled, supreme surcease of bondage, nibbana. So it's that simple shift in his perceptions. There was like an intuition in his heart, recognizing this is not the only option. Just living according to worldly aims and values. This is not the only option. I feel, I intuit, there are other things I can do here. There are other ways I can live. There's another path I can follow. Why don't I try to follow that? There's something in me that says there is the unaging, the unailing, the deathless, the sorrowless. Now, maybe the possibility is there to awaken to that, to realize that. So let's try that instead. And that was the impulse that led him out of the palace, that led him to let go of all of his comfort and his status and his wealth and everything that was good in his life, everything that was familiar. That was the impulse that said, okay, I can see where that's going. And similarly with the story of the 4 chariot rides out with Channa, to seeing the old person, the sick person, the dead person, and then the religious seeker on the streets of Kapilavatthu, then that also represents that same impulse, like saying, okay, I'm sure there's an alternative, so let's try that, because I see where this other path goes, I see where the path of worldliness goes, so let's try something else. Now it's interesting that in the scriptures, in a different section in the Samyutta Nikaya, what's called the connected discourses, or the collection of the Buddha's teachings related by theme, there's one section of it, the 43rd section, is called the section on the unconditioned. And it's a whole series of very, very similar teachings, and they take the form of the Buddha saying, I will teach you the unconditioned and the way leading to the unconditioned. I'll teach you the deathless, and I'll teach you the path leading to the deathless. And the very first one of those teachings, the very first one of those suttas, the Buddha then says, and what is the path to the unconditioned? What is the path to the deathless? And then he says, mindfulness directed towards the body. So the mindfulness of the body, kayagata sati, the mindfulness of the body, that is the path leading to the deathless. That is the path leading to the unconditioned. And then each subsequent sutta, the next one says, calm and insight, samatha and vipassana is the path leading to the unconditioned. But and then a whole sequence of others. But the very first one is mindfulness of the body. And so it's very interesting, isn't it, when he says, that what's the way to realize the deathless, what's the way to awaken to the deathless, is to bring attention to this body. And then when we look at the other teachings that he gives about the nature of the body, then so many of those, like in the foundations of mindfulness, so many of those teachings are about the fragile nature of the body, the compounded nature of the body, the body after death and in the process of decay, all the different cemetery contemplations. So that it's an intriguing, ironic thing, isn't it? That the path to the deathless is pointed to by, say, bringing the attention to that which is bound to die, to bringing it to the body, and to, in a sense, to meet and to apprehend, to accept the limited and mortal nature of the body. Now, there's another set of teachings that we recite here very, very often at Amaravati called the 5 subjects for frequent recollection. And these are probably very familiar to many of you, and are often quoted in Dhamma talks. So these 5 are, I am of the nature to age, I am of the nature to sicken, I am of the nature to die. All that is mine, beloved and pleasing, will become otherwise, will become separated from me. I am the owner of my karma, heir to my karma, born of my karma, related to my karma, abide supported by my karma. Whatever karma I shall do, for good or for ill, of that I will be the heir. Thus we should frequently recollect. So, I've been reciting that for more than 30 years now. So this is similarly very important reflections on the nature of the body. Now you might think that when we hear those words, I am of the nature to age, I am of the nature to sicken, I am of the nature to die, all that is mine, beloved and pleasing, will become otherwise, will become separated from me. Just hearing those words, even as I'm reciting them, it's depressing, isn't it? And I know what's coming next. I know what the words are, and I'm even just talking about it. But still, just saying those words, there's a kind of isn't there? There's a sort of sinking of the heart, or don't say that. I was enjoying the summer afternoon. And people would often wonder, well, why would the Buddha talk about that? Why would he make so much of that? That's pretty depressing. Was he just sort of being malicious or spiteful, or just kind of wanting people to be enjoying people's misery, But the reason why the Buddha encourages that kind of reflection, it's because it's through accepting aging and sickness and death, and acknowledging the inexorable quality of that, the inescapable quality of that on the material plane, that in a mysterious way, that through accepting that, then we find we are able to open the door to that which is beyond it. when we're caught up in denial of it, hoping it's not going to happen, or hoping that nothing happens to me or to our dear ones, pushing it away, denying it, rejecting it, resenting it, fearing it, and hoping it won't happen, or at least not yet, not now. But rather recognizing, yes, this is the deal. This is the small print. This is all part of the contract that was signed at our birth. When we're born, this is the contract. It's all there in the small print. Of course, you can't read the small print when you're newly born, but that's what's there. That the cause of death is birth. So many of you will have heard Lumpur Sumedho saying that many, many times, that the cause of death is not a car crash or cancer or emphysema or kidney disease. The cause of death is birth. That's the root condition. And so the Buddha points to the fact that it's only when we turn to that and acknowledge it, say, yes, this body, what I am in terms of this conditioned being, this is of the nature to age, this is of the nature to sicken, this is of the nature to die. And I'm sure, even though there are many, many doctors here, and many of you probably spent a lot of time being involved in research and treatment and developing all sorts of good techniques, I think every doctor in the room will recognize that no matter how many diseases we cure and find treatments for that are very effective, that there's not going to be a day when the hospital's closed because nobody's getting sick anymore. Is that fair to say? No matter how far into the future that we go, just the very fabricated and conditioned nature of the body points to the fact that, and the way that diseases develop. Now we have all sorts of diseases that didn't exist 100 years ago, that are artifacts of bacteria and other conditions that have developed through adapting to our medicines, or that are say, prevalent illnesses because we are all living longer. So that the Buddha says that don't be holding out for the day when nobody gets sick, or because this is part of the whole natural process. And in fact, being born in the human realm, this is the prime territory for being enlightened. Because in the Deva realms, where bodies do last a lot longer and don't get so uncomfortable or fall apart so quickly, then they retain their good looks for many more thousands of years and eons even. So it's very hard to develop insight in those realms. But here in the human realm, because these bodies do age very quickly, they do fall apart very quickly, then this is a great territory for developing wisdom, developing insight. I've often said to people how I studied psychology and physiology at university many years ago. And at the end of 3 years of studying physiology, I came to the definite conclusion that this body could not work. It's impossible. It's just got too many things to go wrong. It's staggering, the number of things that have to function correctly and efficiently in order just to be able to wake up in the morning and open your eyes, let alone stand up and walk. Just standing without even moving is a flat-out miracle. Putting standing a human body up on two legs and having it balance, it's amazing how the body does that. Even just bending a muscle, the number of processes that have to happen just to do a simple thing like that is incredible. So I felt, okay, it can't work. It's too complex, too amazing. So that coming across Buddhist teachings and the reflections on the fragile and impermanent nature of the body, I already had a great empathy for that. So yeah, right. This is absolutely true. That's the way it is. So when we bring our attention to reflect on the body in this way, and we accept the quality of aging and sickness and death as part of the natural process, the inescapable natural process, then what we're doing is we're bringing our heart, our view into alignment with reality. So we're not looking at aging as something that's going wrong, or sickness as something that shouldn't be, or that death is some kind of dreadful, sort of unfortunate accident that could be avoided. We're much more recognizing, this is part of how it has to be. This is part of the system. Nothing has gone wrong. Everything is working according to the patterns of nature. And that quality of dukkha, of stress or discontent, comes from that feeling of wrongness, that it shouldn't be this way, or this isn't fair. Because it might not be what we prefer, getting in a particular illness, or our faculties being limited, our hearing going, our mobility going, our eyesight going, that we might feel like that's not what we would prefer or what we were asking for, but here it is. This is part of what we are born into, and that the fact that the body ages, that things don't work as well as they did when we were 23, that's to be expected. Nothing has gone wrong. It's just we're at a different part of the process of change. So what that quality of acceptance then opens us to is then the insight that this body and its aging process, its ailments, that when there's a full and completely open-hearted acceptance, then we're able to develop the insight into the actuality that the body is not self, feelings are not self, because alongside those reflections on I am of the nature to age, I am of the nature to sicken, I am of the nature to die, alongside those you also have the teachings on not self. And so this is the really crucial piece, so that whereas I would say aging and sickness and death are definitely inescapable in terms of the physical realm, our identification with the body and its ailments and its aging and so forth, and the death of the body, that is optional. It's optional whether we identify with that or not. It's optional whether we call this as something that is me and mine and who and what I am. That's where we have an option. So this is the key piece, and what is I feel is in looking at this area where the whole issue of liberation hinges. It's like, yes, the body is aging. Yes, it will get sick. Yes, it will die. All of these bodies will die. But if these bodies are not self, then what's the problem? If these bodies are not who and what we are, then the fact that they get born and they die, well, what's been lost? When was anybody ever made any the less by dying? It's one way of putting it. So that this is the crucial insight that comes through the development of meditation, particularly vipassana meditation, learning to see all the aspects of the body, the physical structures of the body, the feelings of the body, the perceptions of the body, moment by moment, minute by minute, day by day, seeing that the feelings are not self, the body is not self, perceptions are not self, mental formations are not self, consciousness is not self, and that this was the crucial teaching that after the Buddha came to Varanasi and met up with his 5 companions, then this was the very teaching that enabled them all to become totally enlightened. It was this very teaching on anatta, on not self, that helped the 5 companions to be fully liberated, fully enlightened, just like the Buddha. So again, this is a very simple logic, painfully simple logic, and so I hope you can follow it. But so if it shouldn't be that difficult. So if the body is not self, if we take that as a proposition, so if the body is not self, feelings are not self, then if that's not who and what we are, if it cannot be said of the body, this is me, this is mine, this is what I am, then if the body gets sick, or the body experiences pain, or the body dies, if it's not what you are, if it's not yours, then where's the problem? It's like somebody stealing another person's car. It's like you come out into the field here, and then just not trying to be too sort of blasé about this, but if you go out to the field and you find another of the good people here who was parked next to you, they have had their car stolen. You go, oh, that's a shame. They've had their car stolen. I'm fine. You get into your car, you drive away. Them losing their car, just pretending that you're not a compassionate or caring person for the moment. But somebody else losing their car, it doesn't impact you in the same way because it's not yours. It's like, oh, that's a shame. Oh well, she's probably insured. I'm sure it'll work out all right. Or making it even less personal. In autumn, when the leaves fall off the trees, how many of us experience heartbreak Oh, poor leaf. I mean, maybe if we're ultra compassionate and identify with every leaf on every tree, we think, oh, poor things, that leaf has died, oh, it's dropped off, oh, poor thing, oh dear. I feel I'm a fairly compassionate person, but I must say, when autumn comes, I don't find myself weeping over every leaf that shrivels and drops. That's what autumn is about. But for the trees to survive, well, the deciduous trees, they need to lose their leaves to make it through the winter, because if they don't, then they lose too much water and they suffer, and they will die. So losing their leaves is part of their life process. So if we develop that quality of insight, letting go of identification with the body and with the personality, we develop the vipassana meditation and train ourselves to see, this body, of course, it's, the body needs to be looked after, and we take care of it, we clothe it, we feed it, we nurse it, we give it the medicines that will be helpful to keeping it reasonably comfortable and vital and in as good a state of well-being as possible. But we're not looking to it as a refuge. We're not looking to it as something that is who and what we are. It's not fundamentally ours. And so that, like looking after a garden, you take care of the plants and you bring them on, and that. But yet, when the autumn comes, or when the season's passed and the roses aren't blooming anymore, then the flowers die off and the leaves go brown, they drop off, and that's nothing is lost in that. That's just part of the cycle of the garden. That we see it and we hold it in that way. So I've just been spending the last few days with my sisters, who are both avid gardeners, so I've got a lot of flower and leaf consciousness going at the moment. So right now we're in high summer. This is the height of summer. It's, a steamy, hot summer afternoon, and many of the flowers are out and the leaves are all green. So this could be compared to being in the high summer of our lives, when we're healthy, we have our faculties, we can see and hear and move about fairly easily, we can think straight, and so that is sort of the kind of high summer mode. But if we think this is how it should be all the time, then when autumn comes and the chills come at night time and the mists rise, the leaves start to die off. Oh no, terrible disaster. Oh my God, what happened to the garden? All the leaves have gone. The roses have fallen. Everything's dead. Oh. We'd be looked upon as a crazy person. He said, no, this is what the trees do. That's their nature. There's nothing to weep over. It's just part of their cycle. So similarly, when we develop this quality of insight and learn to let go of identification with the body, with the personality, then as things go in their natural way, then we're not diminished. As our wrinkles multiply and our memories fade and our hearing diminishes and our eyesight diminishes, then rather than thinking anything is being lost, we recognize, this never was mine in the first place. All the way along. It's not that it was mine and now it's gone. Now it's not mine anymore. This never really was mine. This didn't really have an owner. This never really was who and what I am along the way. Now I realize this might be easy enough to say these words, but it's very difficult for us to say digest these, and to really take these in and to bring this home or take this to heart. So it's easy to talk about, but difficult to do, as they say. Also, when we talk about aging, sickness, and death, it's a lot of focus on the physical form, a physical body. But also, these same teachings, the same process relates to psychological death, or what you can call ego death, and our fear of that, because it's quite common for people in the West to say, I'm not afraid of dying. I don't really mind dying. I don't want a lot of pain. But I'm not afraid of dying. And in a way that their sort of dissociation from the body and natural processes is so strong that they I think that the death of the body is a sort of abstract and remote thing. But then you realize that their identification is much more with their personality. So that the idea of, I don't mind dying, yes, my life will come to an end and that's fine, no big thing, I hope it's not too painful, but I'm okay with that. But then being confronted with ego death, like being fired from your job, or having your spouse walk out on you, or your children starting a hate campaign against you, your bank collapsing, all your shares losing their value, right? All the things that we are identified with on an ego level, like failure, rejection, all those kind of things we can be terrified of, and that whereas the physical death is some sort of remote thing that happens to other people. It's sort of many people have never in the West never even seen a dead body, right? It's not uncommon to go into middle age, late age, without ever having seen a dead person. But we know about failure. We know about failing the exam, being fired from the job, having our friends reject us, a broken marriage, a broken friendship, and the pain and difficulty that goes with that. That's familiar to all of us, right? So this process, all these processes, and also the transcendence of them, relates to ego death as well. One little illustration of this I like to quote is many years ago, probably about 10 or 15 years ago now, Harvard University did a survey about fear, and they interviewed about 6,000 or 7,000 different subjects, different people, and they asked the people what they were most afraid of, and they developed a top 10 objects of fear. And so the number 10 on the list was something like having your house burgled and your precious possessions stolen. And then number 9 or 8 was like being physically attacked and harmed and hospitalized, being injured by others. Number 5 or 6 was having your children or your loved ones physically harmed, and number 3 or 4 was your country going to war and seeing all of your loved ones around you being harmed, and your country and your culture being destroyed. Number 2 on the list was nuclear war, worldwide nuclear war, and it got more and more intense as you went up the list. But can you guess, or maybe some of you already know, what number 1 on the list was? So people were most afraid of, even more than nuclear war, even more than the destruction of life on earth. Public speaking. Public speaking. Number 1 on the list. So above your house being burgled and your possessions lost, your children being attacked and beaten up, your country going to war, and the world being destroyed, the destruction of life on earth, even more frightening was public speaking. So ego death is more frightening, more painful, more off-putting than even the destruction of life on the planet. So that, to me, was a very interesting statistic. So when we talk about transcending aging, sickness and death, it's not just with the body, but it's also transcending failure, transcending rejection, transcending loss, transcending dying on stage. And it's your cue, and your mouth freezes solid. But when we shift this view, this is what's called, and that we change the attitude. This is what is called the change of lineage, or this is part of what is the entering the stream. The Buddha referred to this as a change of lineage, because when you recognize the body is not self, that this is not who and what we are, then rather than your lineage being your parents and your grandparents and your great-grandparents and great-great-grandparents, then the change of lineage is recognizing, well, that's where my body comes from, that's where my conditioning comes from. But what I am, what is fundamentally real, is the Dhamma. So that the change of lineage is, rather than identifying with the body and the personality and our genetics, it's in a sense, it's identifying with the Dhamma instead. So that this change of view, this is how we find there is an option in relationship to aging and sickness and death, so that the body is necessarily tied up with that and cannot avoid it, but you don't have to be. So there is no option in terms of the body's aging and sickness and death, ultimately speaking, but there is an option in terms of identification, that's where escape is possible. That's where liberation, freedom is possible, and that's where that's what the Buddha's teaching points to. And that when we live in that way, when we live in relationship to the body in this way, then we're very happy to look after it and take care of it and live in relationship to other people in a wholesome way. We do the best we can to look after ourselves and to say we put our effort into a project. We want success and we try not to fail. We do the best we can, but we're not identified with success and failure. We're not identified with health or sickness or comfort or discomfort. And just to finish off, because I see that the 2 o'clock must have come around, 3 o'clock must have come around because the tea's appeared on the horizon. Just to finish off with a very poignant and beautiful statement from Venerable Sariputta. This is from the Theravadin, the verses of the enlightened elders. So Venerable Sariputta, who was the Buddha's chief disciple, in these verses, sort of enlightenment verses that he composed, he says, I do not long for life, I do not long for death, but I await my time like a servant does their wages. So I'm not waiting for this all to be over. I'm not hanging on. I'm not waiting. I'm not hoping it's going to last. But I know that there's a payday coming, and there will be no more burden of the body. There will be no more, limitation. No more, impact of the conditioned realm. It doesn't say what sort of life after death for an arahant is about, but he just says this very beautiful and simple but suggestive phrase, I do not long for life, I do not long for death, but I await my time like a servant does their wages. So on that note, and with the tea getting filled up and awaiting everybody, I will finish and offer these thoughts for consideration. So we'll pause for, I can't really see the clock because this gentleman with the blue shirt is standing in the way. There we are, 3 o'clock on the button. So we will now pause and have tea and refreshments for about 20 minutes and then reconvene at about 20 past. So if you have any questions or reflections, the things you'd like to ask, then please reconvene at that time.